Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm very excited today because I'm interviewing the author Kit Mallory. We'll be talking all about her work and how she came to sign with Laura. So let's go.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Simeon.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, Kit. So to start with, could you just tell us a bit about yourself and your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I live in Devon with my wife and my cats, who you might well see the cat's not the wife at some point during this. I have been writing pretty much my whole life. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but sort of remember being in primary school and like writing stories in little notebooks, things like that. So I've been writing pretty much my whole life. I have self-published a couple of YA dystopian books in the last few years, and I've always kind of gravitated towards writing fantasy, mostly YA, but I'm sort of branching out into adult now as well, which is quite exciting. I think, did I mention I work in mental health? My day job, so kind of mental health representation always finds its way into my books as well. I tend to gravitate towards writing very character-driven stuff, and yeah, somehow kind of my work always seems to find its way in some respects as well.
Well, that's really good. I would imagine it's quite authentic representation then because of your job.
Yeah, I would hope so. And I sort of try to, if it's not things that I sort of have personal experience of, to make sure that, I get sensitivity readers as well, and not just kind of rely on sort of what I've learned from my job. But yeah, it's really important to me. I think, the having kind of accurate, good sort of like rounded representation is something that I feel really passionately about. So if I can kind of contribute to that, then that's
Oh,
awesome.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Just before we go on, if people want to read your books, where would they go?
They would go to Amazon primarily, so they're available in print and ebook. So under Kit Mallory. So the first one says a duology. The first one's called Blackout. The second one is called Sparks.
That's fantastic. And why do you think YA? Because I keep trying to write YA and
Really?
failing and ending up to writing adult. So what draws you to YA?
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I'd be really curious to hear more about that. Um, I think there's something about the themes in YA. I think there's something about that kind of time of life, when you're sort of experiencing things for the first time and you're having, you're having a lot of kind of like really sort of intense emotions, intense relationships. You're figuring out who you are and kind of what your place in the world is, and sort of how you fit into that, and yeah, who you want to be. And I just think that's sort of like endlessly fascinating, really, as a kind of thing to dig into. I think that's why I sort of gravitate towards it. There's something about that kind of, like who am I? How do I want to shape the world around me, that I just find really, just endlessly fascinating.
No, that is really fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, apart from both being agented by the same person, you and I have something in common. And I know it's typically not done to talk about it, but I actually think it's good to talk about it, and because so few people do. So
Yeah.
we've both just recently gone out on submission. We're in the
Yes.
sub club. So
Yes.
how are you finding it so far?
Well, I think the novelty of being on submission hasn't worn off yet. I think I've been out on sub for about 6 weeks, less than 2 months, and I think just it was so exciting to sign with Laura, and she was so sort of enthusiastic about the book, and the ideas that she kind of gave me for revisions. I felt really, really strengthened it. So it was quite exciting, sort of going through that process and going out on sub. And I have to say, I think Laura's like made it a lot easier as well, because she's so lovely, she's so communicative. We've sort of agreed that she'll just send me like a little update kind of at the beginning of every month about sort of feedback that's coming in. So that means I don't have to be kind of constantly watching my inbox and wondering when the next rejection's coming in. And that has really helped, actually, because I thought I would just obsess about it. But actually, to be honest, I mostly just sort of forget about it until the beginning of the month comes around. So yeah, so far, ask me again in a few months' time. But so far, it's been all right. How about you?
Well, it's only been 2 weeks, so I'm
Okay.
still kind of in the wow, it's actually gone out kind of
Yeah.
stage. But it's the middle of summer. I think everyone's going to be off on holiday, so I'm not
Mm.
expecting anything to happen quickly, which is fine. To be honest, it's just nice to be out again. And like you said, Laura's been really supportive,
Mm.
and having our writers group, Laura set us up a Discord.
Yeah.
That's really helped as well.
Mm.
But I'm kind of I'm just going to keep my mind busy. I've already started a new project and I've got the YouTube going. So I think I'm
Yeah.
just going to try and do other things and not worry about it.
I think that seems to be the way, doesn't it? I'm working on
Yeah.
something new as well, and it's been a really good distraction, which I think definitely is seems to be the key to kind of keeping your sanity and just kind of like managing your expectations as well. I think everyone has this dream that you'll like go out and sub, and within a week, like an editor will have like stayed up all night reading your book, and so, then you'll be like, yeah. And obviously, it doesn't really work like that for most people. So yeah, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's just sort of reminding yourself how well you've done to, that the book is good. You wouldn't have got this far if the book wasn't good. And then there's just a lot of stars that have to align at this point. So
Yeah. Well, I always think the fact that professional editors are going to read your book and maybe give you some feedback on it, and
mm,
they might enjoy it, even if they don't pick it up. A
yeah.
professional in the publishing industry might read your work and enjoy it. That's still really cool.
Yeah, yeah. The really surreal moment of kind of Laura sending the list of editors that it's going to, and you're like, yeah, that was a very exciting moment. I haven't really got over that yet. And like you say, just
Yeah.
the fact that it's going across those people's desks, to be honest, I think is pretty amazing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving back to your writing, how did you kind of find your genre and your niche, do you
Mm.
think?
Oh yeah, this is a really good question. So so I think, like I said, I'd always kind of just gravitated towards YA and towards fantasy as well. I mean, I've always been a really avid sort of fantasy reader. I remember my English teacher when I was in year 7, like desperately trying to get me to read like anything else apart from Terry Pratchett.
Ah, yes, yes.
Yeah. So I think it's always been fantasy. That's always been kind of in my sort of in my blood, really. And like I said, I wrote these 2 sort of like near future dystopian books, which, to be honest, are a little bit too close to the bone now. I started writing them
Is
in
it all
2000.
coming true? What
Yeah,
you
like
wrote?
horror, seriously. I feel like they accidentally predicted the future with those books in a really awful way. So I
Oh
started writing them
no.
in 2012 when Obama was president, and Brexit was not a word, and we've moved a lot closer in that time. So yeah,
Uh-oh. I
so
have to read these now and see what came true.
yeah, let me know what you think when you, yeah, if you do. It's so I'd always gravitated towards writing quite dark stuff, I think, and then the pandemic happened,
Yeah,
and I just thought, I just want to write something. I just want to read things, and I want to write things that are just full of joy and hope
yeah,
and compassion, and and I started writing this thing, not really know it. Like this kind of I suppose apparently romantasy is a word now. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
guess cozy romantasy, I suppose you'd call it. And I just loved it so much. Like just the whole experience of writing it was just wonderful, and I think it really got me through that first lockdown, actually. And yeah, and I just thought, yeah, this is, I want more of this in my life, and I think I want, I feel like there needs to be more of this in the world as well.
Yeah, I think
So,
a lot of people felt that way. I mean, it's not a
mm,
coincidence after the pandemic, we're getting cozy fancy and romancy and all that
mhm.
stuff becoming the new hot topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of years ago, it felt quite sort of that really wasn't the thing at all, was it? Like at that time,
No.
like the genre was still kind of like very orientated towards like really dark stuff, and no one was really talking about sort of sort of lighter fantasy, cozy fantasy. And I remember like writing this book and thinking no one's ever going to want to read this because no one gets stabbed in the face. But I feel like the world has sort of and the kind of the market has sort of shifted a bit now, which is really exciting, and it means there's a lot of really wonderful stuff coming out, which is really exciting to read. And you write cozy fantasy as well, right?
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
discovered I'm a romancy author, which I
Yay.
didn't know that I now do. And yeah, I kind of had a similar experience. You know, I just wanted to write something joyful and
Yeah.
kind of with some warmth and heart in it that
Yeah.
didn't need all this kind of grandiose stuff. That was quite a contained local story in the English countryside with a bit of
Oh,
magic. You know, it's nice.
I'm really excited to read your book. It sounds wonderful. So
Oh,
yeah.
maybe we can do a swap. But yeah, you're right. Before then, it was all like really gritty YA with
Mm,
assassins. Everyone was an assassin.
yeah.
Before then, now it's all changed. Um,
Yeah.
so you mentioned Terry Pratchett,
Mm,
one of my favourite authors of all time. Do you have any
mm.
other writing influences?
Oh, yeah. So Diana Wynne Jones, I think,
Yeah.
was one of my earliest and biggest influences, and is still one of my favorite writers. And I think the thing that I really love about her work is she was the sort of the first person who kind of introduced me to the notion that you could be sort of flawed and still be the kind of hero of a story. Her characters are kind of full of very sort of human traits, and they're not like the kind of cool kids or the popular kids, but and they're really sort of just just sort of fleshed out and well rounded. And I love her work so much. And particularly the kind of Crestomancy stories. So she was a huge influence on me. And then I think, sort of as a teenager, kind of Margaret Atwood, Kate Atkinson, and those kind of really, sort of kind of gorgeous, sort of, feminist kind of literary writers, I think had a big influence as well. And then more recently, I think people like TJ Klune and Freya Mask, who are writing, fantasy sort of in that vein where, nobody has to like get their head cut off, and there's kind of just some kind of like wit and some levity to it. That those I'm really enjoying those writers.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so I think we should hear the story then of how did you come to sign with Laura?
so So Laura had been like a dream agent of mine for quite a while, and as you know, she was only signing authors in the north of England for quite a while, and I was kind of sort of in a slightly unchill way, sort of following her on Twitter and thinking, and every time she sort of posts something, I'd be like, oh, why can't I still query her? And then sort of late last year, she tweeted and said that she was going to be opening to queries from all over the UK at the end of January, I think it was. And I, in my very unchill way, so what I did, so I have a kind of sort of routine, I suppose, around writing, and I get up quite early in the morning. So I start work at 8, and I kind of get up at 6, and I write from 7 to 8 every morning, and then all day on
Oh, wow.
Fridays. And and that's my kind of sort of stick to that, and that kind of works really well for me. It's a nice way to start the day. Anyway, so I think the day that Laura opens to queries was a Monday, and I, in an extremely unchill way, I sort of got up and like sent my query to her about 7 o'clock in the morning on the day that
Nice.
she opened. um, and didn't really expect anything to come of it. And then the next afternoon, she emailed me and said, "Can I see the full?" And I did that thing that I'm sure most authors probably do, where you have about a 3-line reply to write, and it takes you about an hour and a half to write it because you
Yeah,
obsess over like every single word. And then the email just turns out to be something like, "Yeah, here it is. Great, thanks." And yeah. Yeah, and then a few weeks after that, she got in touch and asked to arrange a call. And I, again, was very unchill about the whole thing. And distinctly remember, I don't know if Laura will remember this, but she's kind of sort of started by sort of saying, "Okay, so Dina, tell me about yourself, tell me about your writing." And what I said was, well, basically, I said I write books that there's no market for. So I'd written these YA dystopian books at a time when the dystopian genre was dying. I'd written this cozy fantasy book before cozy fantasy was a thing. And Laura was like, "Okay." So it's amazing that she signed me, really, after that. But yeah, I just sort of like I say, she'd sort of been a kind of a dream agent of mine for a while, and yeah, I just had this sense that we would work really well together. So
yeah. And actually, there's perfect market for your book. You were just ahead of the game.
Exactly, I'm just ahead of my time. That's what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously, apart from hopefully getting a book deal, what would your writing goals for the year be?
So at the moment, I'm working on my first ever, actually, sort of adult fantasy, which is it's sort of a contemporary fantasy, very loose retelling of Robin Hood, but where every character is a queer woman, basically. And there's a whole
Awesome.
rival lovers thing and a sort of murder mystery. There's a lot going on. I'm not quite sure what the word count is going to be or how I'm going to deal with that. But yeah, so my goal at the moment is to finish that and to sort out the plot of that. I've never written a murder mystery before. It involves a lot more plotting than I'm used to. I'm definitely a kind of pantser usually. And I also have like a kind of little new idea sort of germinating at the back of my mind. So it would be really cool to kind of start drafting that as well. I'd really like to kind of like just work on my sort of like craft a bit more as well. Like I think kind of get to grips with the sort of craft of plotting, as opposed to winging it, and see if and kind of learn to sort of work that into my process a bit more. And I really want to just do a lot more beta reading and reading other people's things. Like something I really
Yeah.
love doing. So how about you? Can I ask about your goals? What have you got on this
Yeah.
year?
Well, my wife insisted that I be a bit chill after I got the book out because I've been working non-stop on it since last August, I think. So it's been quite a while, and did 2 complete rewrites of the thing. So me being chill is I'm doing 200 words a day on the new one, and
Nice.
that's like and doing lots of reading for it because it's going to be kind of a modern day gothic romance. So I'm reading a lot of
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah, I'm playing around with some of the tropes. So I'm reading a lot of gothic romance at the moment and trying to up my knowledge on that. So that's going to be me over the summer. I think lots of reading. Maybe try and get sort of 10,000 words done over the summer. That kind of, and then if it's got legs, I'll maybe do like NaNoWriMo or something and try and do a good chunk in a month. But
Yeah.
we'll see.
Isn't it
Yeah.
great when your research just gets to be reading loads loads of awesome books?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a lot of perks of being a writer, and that's one of
definitely.
them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that sounds really exciting too. It sounds quite different from the one you've got on sub at the moment.
Yeah, well, I wanted to do something slightly different. I mean, it
Mm,
was still comedy, still have romance, still be set in England,
mm,
but I wanted to play around with some other tropes
yeah.
maybe. And I do like gothic fiction,
Yeah.
so I thought gothic romance might be a good thing.
Amazing.
So can I ask then, what's the best bit of writing advice you've ever received?
Oh, I think there are two things. One is definitely about embracing criticism. I think the point in my sort of writing where I really started to kind of take it seriously and I really started to kind of develop and grow as a writer was when I started joining writers groups and sort of seeking out feedback from other people. And I think, we all know it's excruciating, isn't it? And
Yeah.
you have to, yeah. And the way that I sort of I guess dealt with that, because I'm not a person that loves taking criticism, if I'm completely honest, was just to kind of really
No.
throw myself into it, kind of like wholehearted sort of participation and kind of seek out as much critique as possible. And I think that piece of advice, about kind of like how to level up, really, I think was such a game changer for me. And then the other thing I think, which is I suppose more about kind of, I get not so much about writing craft, but more about just like being a writer. I have an incredible friend, very dear friend called FD Lee, who is a self-published author. Her books are amazing. And I was quite a few years ago now, I think, bemoaning the fact that my book Blackout, although it had kind of had some success, it had been shortlisted for a fairly major competition, and I just wasn't getting anywhere with it in traditional publishing, and I was very sad about that. And got drunk at the Christmas market in South Bank with my friend Faith, and she said to me, "Look, do you want the kudos or do you want it to be read?" And I have never ever forgotten that, because a little light bulb went on in my head at that moment, and I thought, I want it to be read. I don't care if it only gets read by 10 people. I'm really proud of this book, and I want it to be out in the world. Yeah, again, that is something that really stayed with me, and I think really changed my relationship with sort of with being an author, I guess. So yeah, that was good advice, and that is definitely something that I would say to anybody who is sort of teetering that path of which way do you go with your writing. And so I'm very sorry about my cat and my cat's bum.
That is very good advice. Even with your cat getting in the shot,
Yeah.
that's excellent advice. Okay, so this has been lovely. Final question: what are you reading at the moment?
At the moment, I'm reading on the subject of romantasy, Mortal Follies by Alexis Hall.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. It's just come out. It's a Regency sapphic romantasy set in Bath, where I used to live, and it's everything I could possibly want in a book.
It does sound good.
Yeah, it's funny, and it's got amazing characters and amazing sexual tension between the two main characters, and it's just perfect in lots and lots of ways. So highly recommend. How about you? Well, what are you reading right now?
The Tenant of Wildfell Hall and
Oh,
Babel. So I'm doing an audiobook and a book. So
yeah.
Babel's my book and Tenant of Wildfell Hall's my audiobook.
Those are quite. I mean, I actually haven't read Babel, so I'm going to assume they're quite different.
Oh yeah, they're completely
Yeah,
different. Completely different. Well, Tenants of Wildfell Hall's for research for the new
yeah,
one, so that's in Gothic romance, and Babel's just because I wanted to read it, and everyone's
nice.
saying how great it is, and it has been very good so far. I'm only 100 pages into it, but it's been really good.
Nice,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me, Kit. Do you have anything you want to mention or plug before we sign off?
I don't think so. Thank you for the offer. Yeah, ask me again when hopefully if the book gets picked up.
Yeah,
Um,
hopefully.
yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much for having me. This has been really really great. Thank you.
Okay, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you everyone for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and if you leave a comment, Kit or I will try and answer. Okay,
Yay.
goodbye.
Thanks everyone.